Drink your milk, kids.
I don't want milk. Milk's for babies.
Yeah, babies.
Oh yeah? Well, I happen to know that milk helps build strong bones. So drink up.
Well, Mr. Miller told me he never drinks milk. Look at him.
Yeah.
Hi, kids. Oh, that's not good.
Got milk.
So today I want to talk to you about my favorite character on TV right now, Judge Steve Harvey.
That's my name.
Now, you're a police officer, Miss Bernice, please.
Nah, I'm just kidding. It's Homelander, a man that doesn't have a reality courtroom show where they cosplay as a judge, but I guess is as qualified as Steve Harvey to call himself one. So hey, maybe that's down the old pipeline at Amazon Prime. Who knows? You guys seen that new Batman show, by the way? It's pretty good. Anyway though, another season of Amazon's flagship show The Boys has come and gone, and you know, it was good, wasn't great. I mean, it had some highs, especially in the finale, but overall it was probably the weakest season thus far. I don't think that's a very controversial statement to make. Granted, I do think certain people have perhaps overstated many of the issues with this season due to the show's nature of being very political, and because of that, it is just naturally going to invite more controversy, especially as the show's popularity grows, which it most certainly has.
Go woke, get yoked.
It's not exactly a show you watch for escapism, but no matter how you feel about the overall quality of the show, whether it's this season or any previous season, pretty much any watcher of The Boys agrees that the main standout of the show, and one of the major reasons why it can be as good as it often is Homelander.
Oh, golly gee shucks, what makes you think I would give two fucks about that?
Yes, unfortunately for the inner contrarian in me, saying that Homelander is the best part of The Boys and one of, if not the best characters on TV, is about as cold a take as you can possibly have. Yes folks, I am brave enough to say, this guy, he's a good character. I am the most fearless hot take artist on the entire internet. And you know, as much as I would love to come up with the most pretentious hipster take imaginable, like how Frenchie is somehow the best character on the show, and his seasonal side quests that go nowhere are really good actually, I just can't deny the reality of what we can all plainly see. I mean, it's the Homelander show. We all know it, and frankly, The Boys is at its best when he takes center stage.
Who wants a creamy, delicious milkshake?
And that's not to say that the rest of the show doesn't have anything to offer, or that the other leads aren't compelling, because they are, but rarely has an ensemble show like The Boys managed to hold my attention almost solely through my interest in what becomes of one single character.
Hands in the air, like you just don't care. Kill.
Like, sure, there were certainly characters in Game of Thrones, for example, like the Lannisters, that I found the most compelling and the most fun to watch, but it's not like they alone carried my interest in that show. Homelander, though, is just such a singular force in The Boys that everything else revolves entirely around. Not only the narrative, obviously, but the way the other actors play off him and are forced to match his intensity. He also allows the show to push the boundaries of what it does each and every season. He's so intense and so unstable that you kind of have to continually up the ante with him to validate that reality, which in a way has become the show's bread and butter.
Hey, Deep. What? Eat fucking Timothy.
As a wise man once said, he's the key to all this. Without him, the show wouldn't just be less wacky and unhinged, but completely unrecognizable. And Eric Kripke and the other writers know this too, because every season Homelander eats up seemingly more and more of the show's focus. I mean, just look at how the show was marketed back in season 1 compared to how it is now. The trailers and the posters for season 1 focused mainly on the actual boys, you know, the main characters, but for the past couple seasons, every trailer opens with a shot of Homelander. The main posters and much of the other promotional material has Homelander front and center. He's not just a mascot, but is treated almost as the sole main character, not just the main antagonist.
It really is all about me.
And I don't mean any of this as a critique of the show. They're just leaning into what the show does best, which just so happens to be him. It's just so insane to think about, though, how much that one character has elevated The Boys from a not totally niche, but certainly smaller satirical parody of the superhero movie craze in post-2016 American pop culture to one of the most talked about and streamed shows out there. It gets bigger and more popular every season, just as Homelander becomes more of the focus. And even if you're a person who thinks the show's had a bit of a dip in quality lately, I guarantee you are still gonna tune in to season 5 to see where he goes next, because you just have to. He's too good a character to not.
No God. The only man in the sky is me.
Now, as we'll get into, there's a whole lot of reasons why Homelander works so well in the show, but if we're being honest, the lion's share of credit and praise simply has to go to Anthony Starr. I mean, the man is just so good in the role, it's stupid.
Listen, Annika. I'm the Homelander. And I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Especially since the writing in the show isn't like always top notch. I mean, it's good, don't get me wrong. There's not like a ton of cringy ass lines, though there are some.
Remove all books and teachers that teach critical soup theory.
But the writing isn't so sharp as to create a character as compelling as Homelander naturally without the heavy lifting of an actor like Starr. I mean, pretty much every scene he is in involves his mind breaking in some capacity or just being generally weird and unstable, and yet he's able to not only show that in a way that's believable and funny, but also manages to make the audience sympathize with him despite who he is and all the terrible things he has done, never going so far as to veer into the mustache-twirling, Dick Dastardly type of villain, and still coming off genuinely terrifying and also deeply human.
Weak? You. I know. You're a fucking disappointment.
Like, Homelander should not be a character that works this well, or really at all. He should be too weird and too wacky and too society or just too out there to work. He's not like this subtle, prestigious character that is just screaming for some actor to drive him to the Emmys. It's this very thin tightrope between absurdity and realism, and Starr somehow is able to walk that in a way that does elevate the character to a level that could rake in awards if not for the fact that he wears a cape.
Go ahead. Release it. Let's light this candle, huh? I mean, sure, I'll lose everything, but then I'll have nothing to lose.
You just can't say enough good things about him. Every scene he is in, even if he doesn't end up doing anything, you're just on razor's edge as a viewer because it looks like he could snap at any moment. You can see it in his eyes as he literally turns himself off and on when a camera is present. It's wonderfully terrifying, and because he's so erratic and unpredictable, you believe that that moment we're all waiting for can come at any time, even if so far it never has. It's made him one of the greatest villains in the history of television, but despite that, he's not really comparable to your typical iconic TV big bad guy. He kind of exists in his own corner of the villain club. You see, most major villains on TV fall into one of two major categories. The most common one, and the one that produces arguably the most amount of iconic characters, is what I'm gonna call the evil mastermind realm that features characters like Walter White, Gus Fring, Tony Soprano, Tywin Lannister, Mr. Burns, Logan Roy, Negan, Hannibal, the Master, Moriarty, Plankton, so on. Now, these guys obviously vary a whole lot. Not all of them are buttoned up fancy man types, but they all are generally calm, well-mannered, charismatic, plotting, highly intelligent, even-keeled, and project much of their villainy through intimidation. Doesn't mean they don't get their hands dirty, but their presence and fear they inspire does a lot of the work for them. They also have very clearly defined goals and ambitions. Power, world domination, revenge, whatever it is, these guys are focused and work towards their goals. And then, in the other major category, you have the crazies. People like Joffrey, Azula, the Joker, Bob, Mama Soprano, Chang, Dennis Reynolds, Cartman, Newman, and Ramsay Bolton, characters that, while very capable of displaying much of the intelligence and even keel of their masterminds, are generally defined as being much more erratic and unpredictable, making choices based on impulse or choices that only serve to create chaos, rather than the masterminds who almost exclusively make choices for power and advancement. Overall, they do a lot less long-term planning ahead. Now, there is of course plenty of crossover in these two categories, and it's not like they're the only two options either. I mean, what I'm saying is not exactly gospel here, but pretty much all your iconic TV baddies are gonna fall into one of these two realms, or at the very least be written that way. Swiper, evil mastermind, DW, crazy.
I can be your partner for the next race.
Sorry, Sue Ellen. It's a brother and sister race.
Maybe there's a contest for lonely children after this.
Homelander, though, is unique in that despite how sadistic he is, he's more of a force of nature than he is a character with clear villainous intent. I mean, yes, to be clear, he is a terrible person that intentionally does horrifically evil things, but there really isn't anything specifically evil driving him beyond a simple need for attention and a complete lack of empathy. That need just so happens to, more often than not, manifest itself in terrible ways, but he doesn't revel in being evil like a character like the Emperor does, or get joy out of causing chaos like the Joker, or get a rush out of grabbing status, wealth, and power like a Walter White type. Now, there are moments when he does revel in intimidating people into doing things they don't want to do, like making poor Deep eat an octopus, but he rarely seems to actually get a lot out of these moments. If anything, he seems more disgusted and annoyed that they actually fear him. He's really just full of contempt for everyone and everything around him. He hates life, and not in a depressive way, but in the most literal sense. He despises everything in the world. He has no interest in anything. And that's not to say that he doesn't have moments when he does get pleasure out of like inflicting pain on people, because he does. There's obviously a whole lot of moments like that. But like most things he does, being evil is really just a chore for him. The man is incredibly lazy, which is perhaps the most fun part of his character. He hates doing work. He takes every possible opportunity to sit down. You pretty much never see him move above the pace of like a brisk walk. Seriously, whenever you plan on rewatching like any part of this show, pay attention to his speed. He only walks or flies, and the only moment you see him move fast in any way is this hilarious moment in season 3 when he's racing Edgar and Starlight to his special boy chair in the middle of the table. That is literally the only time he moves with any conviction, and it's to preserve the most minuscule part of his ego. It's just brilliant. He's also, as a result of this, terrible at fighting, which at first seems a bit off, but it makes so much sense, because if you are this world's equivalent to Superman with no equal and rarely actually do any hero work and never get challenged, you never have to learn how to fight because nothing can hurt you. So he basically only uses his heat vision, as that is the laziest power at his disposal. So when he gets jumped at Herogasm in season 3 and he actually needs to try, he totally blows it, because of course he does. I doubt he's thrown more than like 5 serious punches in his entire life. It's such a great detail to his character, not just because it makes sense and it's funny, but because it's this hilariously wonderful subversion to the classic iconic evil villain. Virtually every famous villain you can think of is hyper competent, even if they're mentally unstable, and certainly never lazy to the point of not running. But Homelander is both, and yet inspires the same amount of fear, which is a testament to how well realized of a character he is. He's not 20 steps ahead or smarter than our heroes. He's just an angry nuke that is just looking for any excuse to go off.
You're sorry? Now? Why? You were just doing your job, right?
I mean, he doesn't even have any real long-term plan or goal or get much desire out of causing chaos. He doesn't really know what he wants, really. Even the things he says he wants don't bring him any real gratification or happiness. He's just this completely broken, empty person, and what makes him so compelling as a character is watching his mind fracture more and more each season, causing him to lash out like this aimless, scared animal. He's terrifying not because he's full of malevolence and cunning, but because he's frighteningly hollow. There is very little holding him together, and it doesn't take much to set him off, and yet he is the walking equivalent of an atomic bomb. So we've all just been waiting for it to finally go off as he gets pushed further and further with every season. And when he finally does snap, he's liable to burn the whole world down with him. Now, he might not. I mean, that's certainly out of the show's budget, but they still make you believe that that could happen. That thought is always there, even if it never happens. It's all very impressive because despite the show's, granted, very earned reputation for going balls to the wall damn near every episode, often to the detriment of the narrative, they've actually managed to show a great deal of restraint with Homelander, breaking him more and more each season, but even now, refusing to push the big red button until that perfect moment. They know he is most interesting not blowing shit up and going crazy, but being annoying and petty and bottled up and unstable and trying to act like a real person. The threat and possibility is all you really need. Now, they still of course do insane stuff with him all the time, but his overall descent into madness has been handled with a lot more restraint than what the rest of the show's tendency to indulge itself at every corner would lead you to believe. He is the one character who doesn't have these mini seasonal arcs. He's been on the exact same long arc since the very first episode, and despite that, it's never once felt stale or like they're padding out the show's runtime, which cannot be said about every character's side quest.
I committed murders. Plural.
There's a 1013 at the front desk. Sir, please put your hands where I can see them.
Tomorrow.
How the fuck did you get out?
I had Mallory pull a few strings.
Just a free piece of advice, not every character needs their own side quest every season, okay? Just gonna throw that out there. Do with it what you will. But what's perhaps even more impressive than how much restraint the show has had with Homelander is that they've managed to pull off one of the dullest, most overused tropes in recent years and actually make it work really well. I'm of course talking about the evil Superman trope.
What's the matter, Kent? Too warm for you, huh? Huh? Please, come on, chicken! I'm gonna get you.
Now, if you're someone who has consumed this kind of media in the past decade or so, you've definitely heard people talk about this trope. It's a thing that lots of people point out as generally being a lazy way of writing Superman or a character like Superman that has these amazing godlike powers. Hell, I even brought it up in my last video, so forgive me if I recycle a few of my points here. It's a trope you see a lot with characters like Superman because admittedly characters like him that possess what are essentially godlike powers are not the easiest types of characters to write as being relatable or having the kinds of struggles that more vulnerable characters have to deal with. More often than not, Superman is not going to be in any serious physical danger. The odds of him encountering something as strong or even stronger than him are much lower than a character like Batman, for example, who can easily be thrown into a fairly low stakes situation and environment and have to use all of his tools in his tool belt to survive. So as a result, you get a lot of stories that feel the need to compensate for that absurd power level by either throwing these apocalyptic level threats at him, see Man of Steel, or just making him evil altogether because for some reason, some people just cannot wrap their head around someone as powerful as Superman being a good person. So they just say fuck it to the whole issue and make him an evil god. Now, that's not to say that that can't work. It's not like those types of stories have no value and can't be done well, but the point is, there is this natural inclination to compensate for what some people believe is a drawback when writing a character like that. Many people believe Superman, on top of being this godlike entity, is nothing more than this boring all-American Boy Scout, and as a result, try to shake that snow globe up and often, ironically, end up moving away from what makes that character special and unique and popular in the first place. They ignore what they believe believed to be a boring character and say, ooh, but what if that guy was evil? How would anybody deal with that? Oh my god, what a great idea. And to be honest, I don't think that's a terrible idea on its face. The idea of making a character as powerful as Superman evil is a good one, and one that can lead to all kinds of interesting and unique stories, but it's just been done so much in recent years, and worse than that, is often just as boring and dull as those writers believe the actual Superman to be. They're willing to turn that switch from good to bad, but are totally unwilling to actually engage with the reality of what a choice like that would actually mean for the character. They don't view Superman as interesting or human or even like a real character, so neither do they an evil version of him. To them, he's simply a force of power to be good or bad, so more often than not, your typical evil Superman is just doing mass murder or genocide or turning the world into some evil authoritarian hellscape. And you know, if you want to go there, that's fine, but what about the actual person? Why does he do it? What is wrong with him? What went wrong in his life to lead him to that point? Answering those questions not only makes a character like that work, but also illustrates why the real Clark Kent is a good person. But you just don't get that with most of these stories. He acts just like vanilla Clark Kent, except he's an asshole. Maybe he wears black and frowns, I don't know, but that's about it. And that's why people like myself talk a lot of shit about this trope, because it's just rarely done in a way that's even in the slightest bit interesting. And yet I love Homelander. But why? Why does this one not bother me when virtually every other example does? Well, simply put, they write Homelander as an actual person. The writers looked at the character of Clark Kent and said, okay, the reason why Clark Kent is a good person is because of X, Y, and Z. He was raised with a family that loved him, he wasn't praised as a god or looked down on as some weird alien other. He was just treated how any other well-adjusted person was in their childhood, and like most people, turned out pretty okay.
Lead.
So in The Boys, instead of just doing the lazy thing of saying, okay, well, now this guy is evil, they say, what if our Superman didn't have any of that and in fact had the polar opposite of that experience? What would he be like then? And the answer is, in many ways, yes, evil, but mainly is just unstable, severely traumatized, and horribly mentally ill. Just like any other person not raised with love and a sense of normalcy would be. It just so happens that he's also the walking, talking equivalent of a nuke that no one has the keys to. That is how you do the trope right, and why it works so well in The Boys. If Homelander didn't have any powers, he would still be a compelling character to follow in a different context, just like Clark Kent would be. But if a generic evil Superman didn't have any powers, they would literally be nothing, because that's all they're written to be. They're just the powers.
I'll take you in without breaking you, which is more than you deserve.
All this is to say, Homelander works because he's a character, not a gimmick. But if one is going to truly understand why Homelander is such a uniquely compelling character, you have to dive into his terrifying, empty soul.
A dirty, shriveled, anemic little part of you that still mewls for approval and love and a mommy and a daddy and a boo-hoo-hoo.
So, starting in Season 1, Homelander, like all the other heroes, is at first made out to be just like the characters they are inspired from. And as such, he is shown to be just like Clark Kent. He's an all-American, hot, red-blooded man from the Midwest that stands for truth, justice, and the American way. He grew up playing baseball and living in a lovely square house in the suburbs with a happy family. A perfect American man. And when we first see him, he's heroically stopping some bank robbers and comes off just like, well, Superman. It even plays music reminiscent of the classic Superman theme. So in that first scene, we're viewing him through the sterilized Vought corporate lens. And even as we find out that many of the heroes like A-Train, The Deep, and Translucent are not what Vought makes them out to be, for the entirety of that first episode, Homelander is still talked about as this golden exception to the rule, which is not to say that he's not a bad guy at this point, because as we of course later find out, he most certainly is and has been for a long time now. But what these earlier appearances from him speak more of is about how stable he is relative to his current status in the show.
Starlight, don't want to be late to your first official meeting. I had a whole welcome speech planned.
Unlike the other heroes who are constantly messing up and revealing how awful they all are, Homelander is about as tight-lipped and buttoned up as possible for a person like him. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't go out to parties and nightclubs. The only times the public sees him is when Vought wants them to, and when he's on camera, he's perfect, nails his lines and comes off as normal as anyone. Even around the Seven, he's very well-mannered and disciplined despite them all knowing how he truly is. Hell, Starlight even calls him Jesus, and it's not exactly an exaggeration. As far as the public knows, there is not a single blemish on his record. And even with all that being a lie, the public persona of Homelander and the real-life Homelander are as close to being the same as they ever were at this point, which is important to point out because Homelander doesn't have a secret identity. It's one of the more under-discussed parts of his character that's far more significant to his eventual decline to madness than people give it credit for. It's only brought up in this one scene with Starlight super early on, but it gives so much insight into his psyche. You see, the other heroes like Starlight or Translucent or A-Train or whoever live more or less normal lives. They're real people with family, friends, loved ones, hobbies, desires, flaws, so on. Being a hero is just their 9 to 5, like it is in real life for a rock star or a famous actor. Sure, their job is being famous, but it's still just their job. Many of them are able to put on street clothes and go get a coffee or aimlessly walk around Target or whatever the fuck they want to do. It's not like a true secret identity like a Bruce Wayne or a Peter Parker type, but there is at least some level of separation. Homelander, though, doesn't have that, and not like in the way that like Iron Man doesn't have that. More of that, he doesn't have any identity at all. He mentions in the scene that he tried having one for a time, but just ended up giving it up, which in the moment doesn't seem that significant because the focus of the scene is elsewhere. But when you think about the way Homelander is, it makes so much sense because the reason why he couldn't maintain a secret identity is not because he got bored or didn't want to, but because he's not a person. He wasn't raised as one, he's not looked at like one, he's not talked to like one, he hardly even has an actual name. It's just John, which is probably nothing more than a generic safe plugin for a normal American male name if Vought ever had to like publicly give him one. It may as well just be Compound V Subject 106 or whatever the fuck it is. It's totally irrelevant. For all intents and purposes, he is Homelander. That is his real name and his only way of existing.
John? Homelander. Just Homelander.
The man is incapable of clocking out and living a normal life. He wouldn't even know how to. It's all just fine dining and breathing up there. It's part of the reason why he's so easily influenced by how he thinks people will think of him, because Homelander is not his job, it's him. So when someone is polling higher than him, it's not just a bad day at work, it's a direct indictment on his value as a person. It's the only way he knows how to have self-worth. It's no accident that we almost never see him not wearing his costume. It's who he is. It may as well be a part of his skin, like whatever the hell is on Piglet's torso. Is that part of his skin, or is that clothing? We'll never know. Well, I guess we do know actually, but you get the point. And what's even more disturbing is that he doesn't even have control over what he does as Homelander. Virtually everything he says is written by other people. The places he goes, the people he saves, what he does with his day is all planned out and dictated by others, which is of course also the case for the other heroes while they're working. But again, he is never not Homelander. He has one identity and it's entirely constructed by a soulless corporate machine.
Captain, you guys are the real heroes.
So in the few times we see him quote-unquote off the clock having nothing to do, he's pretty much just staring off into space still in his costume because he literally doesn't know how to exist as an independent person. He's not a person, he's completely hollow, as if he turns himself off at the end of the day and doesn't even sleep. Now, this would all be hunky-dory for Vought if Homelander was a robot with no human needs, but unfortunately for everyone that exists in this universe, he is a human, and at some point a real personality is going to break through the controlled surface of Vought's golden goose. And what does is essentially complete and total narcissism, which is a very overused term in today's culture and is often misapplied to people and characters who aren't, but Homelander ain't one of those cases. In fact, he meets quite literally every requirement to be considered like the dictionary definition of one. Going through the list here, a grandiose sense of self-importance.
We have to save America. We have to save the world.
Fantasizes about having or deserving.
I'm the one who knows the audience, who knows what's good for this company.
A sense of self-superiority.
I don't make mistakes. I'm not just like the rest of you. I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm better.
A need for excessive admiration.
They want me to be myself?
A sense of entitlement.
Do you wish to be consulted on Stormfront?
Oh, why not? I signed off on all the rest. I'm the leader of the Seven.
Exploitative behavior.
And we have a gay hero.
Really? Who in the Seven is gay?
Queen Maeve.
A lack of empathy.
So what, they're all starving, but one of them's got a fucking cell phone?
You know,
Frequent envy.
if anybody, it should be Maeve.
Well, Maeve doesn't have a 96.
Nobody does. Except you, apparently.
Arrogance.
I need advice. From someone on my level.
Now, to be fair, I'm in no way qualified to label anyone fictional or otherwise as having NPD. I mean, what the hell do I know? But I think this one's kind of a slam dunk, okay? I feel pretty safe about going there, but at the very least, he certainly embodies many of the traits of a person that has NPD. In fact, those traits are really the only way to describe him as a person. Because of how hollow he is, it's literally the only thing to him, which is why he's always on the verge of some kind of mental breakdown. The strands holding him together are just so thin, so anything interfering with his constant narcissistic needs immediately sends him off the rails, which in the show first manifests itself with Madeline Stillwell, or I guess more accurately, her baby. That's right, time to get into some mama issues, boys.
You like that?
No.
So it seems that up to the start of the series, the powers that be at Vought have kept a pretty tight grip on Homelander. He has a few moments where he whines about a line or two or how he wants to do more, but for the most part, his direct overseer, Madeline Stillwell, has about as much control over him as possible. She knows every button of his she needs to push to get him in line. Everything from playing on his excessive need for admiration, all the way up to exploiting his bizarre infatuation with her and the motherly figure he sees her to be.
Gods are pure, and they're perfect, and they're above it all.
And you know, as weird as that whole situation was, it would have likely worked forever. But then she had to go have a baby. What an asshole. And that is the actual inciting incident of the show and what set him down the path we see him on now. Not Butcher, not the boys. This random baby is what loosened the first screw. Just like in The Boss Baby, when the only child gets a boss baby for a brother and he is no longer the sole focus of the parents. It's that classic boss baby premise.
Goo goo gaga.
And as silly as it sounds, this is all by design because you could look at Homelander's development through the series the same way you would look at the development of a child. He starts out very dependent on his mother figure to plan out his day for him and give him attention when he cries, and with the exception of the odd tantrum or two, he shows very little signs of rebellion. In fact, he goes out of his way to do things for her that he thinks will get him praise, like a kid who just learned something new or drew a picture and wants to get a pat on the head for it. But then the boss baby scenario happens, and as a result, his rebellions get more frequent and much less manageable.
You care more about that fucking baby than you do about me.
He lashes out at Stillwell for giving any time to the baby, even if it's on her day off. He goes off script more. He has pretty much no issue letting that plane go down. Now, she still manages to salvage most of these incidents, but his resentment for her is building, and with that, her control over him is fading away, as he sees any attention she gives that baby as a betrayal. Not to mention the fact that his weird desire to be babied himself is only made worse when there is literal breast milk just lying around for him to latch onto. So, as the grip she has on him loosens, the love, if you can call it that he had for her is replaced by the same hatred that he has for the rest of Vought for denying him a life. So at the end of the season, he kills her. Then in season 2, we see him move up to the angsty teenager phase where he is high on his own supply after killing his mother and thinks no one can tell him when he can go to bed. Until Dad comes in the form of Stan Edgar and puts him in his place.
I don't have to consult you about Stormfront or anything else.
But, unlike how he felt about Stillwell, Homelander despises Edgar, but still seeks his approval even more because of how little Edgar gives him. He desperately wants to validate himself in the eyes of his now father figure, so we see him try to exercise more control at Vought by making Ashley his puppet, controlling Maeve, and getting involved with Ryan. He even gets an edgy girlfriend in true rebellious teenage fashion. But, like a kid who's bitten off more than he can chew, all these things eventually come crashing down, and he's forced to tuck tail and run back to his father to fix everything for him, gaining no approval and no respect, proclaiming pants down on top of a skyscraper that he can do whatever the fuck he wants despite being put thoroughly in his place.
You are not worthy of my respect. You are not a god. You are simply bad product.
And then finally, in season 3 and continuing into season 4, he breaks free of his parental figures and takes full control of his life, despite being in no way capable of doing so.
The company is yours. No one left to stand up to you. But I think you'll come to sorely regret that.
Now, none of this fast-forwarding through adolescent development means he's actually going through any meaningful change or learning anything. Quite the opposite, actually. What has happened is just his personality finally being able to break free and develop free of Vought, and now it's just desperately flailing around trying to find out where to go. It also works great for the narrative because as a result of his impulsive choices and power grabs, the brain drain at Vought becomes a massive issue for him. Obviously, he gets rid of Stillwell and Edgar, which are the most essential dominoes, but he also guts crime analytics, board members who make him look stupid, every single original member of the Seven aside from the Deep of all people. He then packs the Seven with idiot yes men like the New Black Noir and Firecracker.
I'm surrounded by sycophants and fucking imbeciles.
It's just that you make a lot of really great points, sir.
Basically anyone capable within the company slowly gets ousted, leaving him with a crew of people so incompetent that he's forced to turn to someone he doesn't understand and is not capable of contending with. It's basically the exact same thing that Cersei goes through in Game of Thrones, and we all know how that eventually worked out for her. But unlike Cersei, and what again makes Homelander such a unique character, is that he is aware of most of this. He's not a genius by any means, but he is a lot smarter than people give him credit for, which is why he's able to take control of the company. But his insane impulses and narcissism is constantly getting in his own way. So he will have these lucid moments of self-awareness where he realizes just how much he's messed up, but he also knows he's incapable of fixing things. And yet, through sheer luck or from help by people who are competent like Sage or Newman, he continues to fail upwards. And again, he doesn't even want to be in charge of the company. You can see it in his face whenever he has to actually do any real work or interact with any of the idiots he's left himself with, like the Deep or Firecracker.
What?
I just want you to know that I will forever be your most loyal servant.
Okay.
So anything.
He despises all these people for the very reason why they're still there, and none of the power grabs he pulls off makes him happy, and he knows it. Unlike most villains, he's self-aware enough to hate himself. That's why he lashes out at the people responsible for making him the way he is. If he really thought of himself as the superior being he says he is, he wouldn't care about getting revenge on those who supposedly ruined him. But deep down, he hates that he is the way that he is, is, and he knows that he was robbed of a real human experience, which is why he copes so hard with that by doubling down on his soup superiority stance. In order to cope with his own existence, he has to believe that. Otherwise, he's just a victim, and his terrible childhood was all for nothing. It makes him a deeply sympathetic character because he's as much a victim of Vought as anyone, perhaps even the single person they've done the most damage to. He has absolutely no sense of what a normal life is, to the point that he doesn't even know how to want one. It's a completely foreign concept to him, which is why he finds comfort in people that actually treat him like a person. People like Maeve or Butcher may despise him and want him dead, but they also speak honestly around him. They don't look up to him as some god or fear him or try and tiptoe around his feelings. They just treat him like anyone else they hate, which for Homelander is about as close to a real human experience as he can have.
See, that's why I love you. You're the only one that tells me the truth.
Like, people have pointed out over the years that it gets increasingly more unrealistic that the boys have managed to all survive this long despite all the times they've been seemingly in complete mortal danger, and there's certainly some truth to that. I mean, there are scenes where it is totally bonkers that any of them survive, but a lot of the reason narratively, beyond of course the need to keep them around to, you know, have a show, is that Homelander doesn't want to kill them. Not really. I mean, they annoy him and often interfere with his plans, which he obviously doesn't like, but they're more importantly one of the only things that actually gives him a real purpose. Before they showed up and began doing their thing, Homelander had nothing to do. He was just going about his miserable, boring life and complaining about lines and fantasizing about milk, and that's pretty much about it. But as soon as a real threat emerges in the form of Translucent's body, he gets actively excited. He loves having someone to contend with, especially someone like Butcher who does not fear him.
Touché, William.
I mean, the only thing he was doing on his own before the boys showed up was smuggling V around the globe to create villains. He needs someone out there to deal with, and the boys provide that. He likes knowing they're out there, not because of the problems they cause, but because they think about him. In a way, it's another form of attention that feeds his ego.
Whoever it was, they just declared war.
If they cared more about killing, oh, I don't know, the Deep than him, he would be personally offended because he needs to feel important, and nothing makes that more real than people devoting their whole lives trying to kill you. Now, saying this does perhaps call into question how much good the boys are actually doing, considering how much they drive him to get off his couch, but it's certainly true that as long as he thinks they can't hurt him, he doesn't really have much of an issue with them being out there. Even at the end of season 4, when he was seemingly ready to finally get rid of them, he sent 2 idiots in the form of Noir and the Deep to kill them, when if he truly wanted them dead, he would have just flown over there in a second and done it himself. And even at the very end, he has them captured, not killed. He still wants them around. Now again, you can alternatively call all this plot armor, and you know what? You're probably not wrong. But it's certainly important for Homelander to have his arch enemies around to think about him.
It really is all about me.
The only other thing that gives him any real purpose is Ryan. Ryan is the only person on the entire planet who actually looks at Homelander as a person and doesn't hate him. He's a genuine source of positivity for Homelander to draw on, which is all the more sad because Homelander is simply incapable of love. He never received any, so he has no idea how to feel it, let alone express it and handle it in a healthy way. It's just not in his nature. People he gets attached to, he views more as possessions, not people. That's why when he and Maeve broke off their relationship years before the show started, she never saw anyone else because he would certainly kill them for playing with one of his toys. Likewise, with Ryan, he admittedly tries his best to be something to him, but he doesn't view Ryan as his son. He views him as an extension of himself and a way to rectify issues that he had to deal with when he was a kid.
I've been manipulated by people my whole life. Being told what to say, where to stand, it's like being a slave, only worse.
Through Ryan, he's taking back power he wished he had earlier in his life by telling him that he doesn't have to do movies and shows and doesn't need to do anything that he doesn't want to do, which is nice and is in line with what is best for him, but is really only on accident that he has moments like this of decent parenting. All he's doing is just standing up for the younger version of himself when he's around him, but when he's not, he doesn't really care much about Ryan. He might ask about him and claim that he's doing what he's doing for Ryan, but it's always only ever been about himself. Any hint that Ryan might take away even the slightest bit of spotlight away from him sets him off like it does if anyone else does it. And whenever Ryan makes an independent choice or expresses an opinion that Homelander doesn't like, his trying to be a good dad act totally fades away.
He's your son. He hates you. He's gonna turn on you. Everyone hates you.
The man has much more interest in being a kid himself than having one of his own. Like everything else in his life, he's just incapable of handling it because his mind is simply broken. At his most vulnerable moments, the only thing he seems to actually want is to not have to do anything. So when he does make choices and does fail, he wants to run back into the arms of someone who can just do things for him. It makes him more of a character that you feel bad for more than anything else. I mean, just look at this moment when he gets a genuine hug from Ryan. That was probably the first real act of love anybody did for him his entire life, and when he receives it, it's like he's a deer in the headlights. He has no idea how to react. He's just a sad, wounded dog. So when his inevitable death comes at the end of the final season, I expect it'll be less of a triumphant Thanos-like victory, but more akin to taking Lenny out back and talking to him about rabbits. More of a mercy kill than anything. I mean, it's not like he actually gets a whole lot out of living beyond the contempt he has for everyone else in the world, but that's also why he's such a good villain. He knows exactly who he is, and he hates it. He hates that he needs constant admiration to function, and he hates even more that he needs it from people that he views as less than dirt. He has nothing but pure hatred for everyone and everything in the world. Even other supes he thinks of as less than him, and he only likes Ryan because to him it's just like looking in a mirror. He's simply an extension of his own ego. But bottom line, there really isn't anything out there that can make him happy. He doesn't like anything. He's just this hollowed out husk of a person that is at this point simply too far gone. We can and should feel bad for him, but there is no saving him. There's nothing to save. All he has is hatred, existing only to inflict pain on the rest of the planet for the sin of having the one thing he will never have, a soul.
I'm Huey, by the way.
Annie.
And in a time where so many movies and shows insist on making every villain some likable anti-hero or just hero altogether, or don't even bother to feature a villain at all, Homelander stands as this amazing example that you can still write a character that is sadistically and unambiguously evil, and also incredibly sympathetic. It may be hard, but it can be done, and when it is, you get characters like him that become iconic.
Starlight, sticks and stones won't break my bones, but words.
No, sir.
Now, granted, they can still fuck all this up in season 5, can't count out that possibility, but at least for now, I feel confident in saying that this milk-drinking freak is perhaps the single greatest character on television right now, or who knows, maybe ever, and one that we are going to be talking about for a long time afterwards. So grab some milk and pour one out for our boy, because God knows he needs it.
Goo goo gaga, I want milk.